Asia, Asiana, APAC, the region's been called many things. Some even call it Far East, wherever that may be. The biggest business mistake most people make is presuming there's one Asia. The reality is very different. The moment you can get your head around this often beautiful, always exciting, sometimes brutal but never boring region, you're halfway there. After all, if you're watching this in Europe, you know there's no such thing as one Europe. And likewise, there's many different ways to work in Latin America. It's no different here. So let's get down to some facts. 42 markets, 4.5 billion people, and over 17 million square miles to get your head round. There are cities like Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou that the populations of Australia, Ireland or Greece could all fit within. And there's big cities like Chengdu that you may never have heard of that are 14 million people big and service provinces of over 160 million. So what does this mean in practical terms for creating your own Asian strategy? Well, first and foremost, you need to work out where you're going to spend your time and energy to get the biggest returns. I'll make some big generalizations here. Let's start dividing this huge continent into chunks. First and foremost, you have Northern Asia, primarily China, Taiwan and Hong Kong. This is normally the most important region for most marketeers because of the huge opportunity and the huge scale that it represents. Next you have Southeast Asia, that goes from the southern tip of Hong Kong to the northern shores of Australia, covering great land masses like the Philippines and Indonesia, the Mekong region of Thailand, Vietnam and Cambodia, and places like where we are today, Singapore. You then have the two hugely important but very independent nations of Korea, Southern Korea of course, and Japan. Mainly because of language and geographical locations, these are normally treated as separate countries and not part of a regional strategy. And last but not least, of course, we have Australia. Now Australia is a bit like the UK. Sometimes we flirt with being in Europe, likewise sometimes Australia flirts with being APAC, sometimes it likes to be independent, depending on how it's feeling for the day. So based on this, possibly the most important and fundamental question to ask yourself is where do you base your business and your people? And it's amazing how often people get this wrong. Quite simply, if your business is in China, you're most likely going to end up in Shanghai and probably should end up in Shanghai. It is the most cosmopolitan, dynamic city in China right now, and it's where a lot of the big business is. The one exception to this is if you do a lot of government work, then you should probably be based in Beijing. The downside, it can be quite chaotic and it is often very polluted. If you're based in Southeast Asia, then you can be in one of two places, Hong Kong or Singapore where we are today. Increasingly, Singapore is becoming the most important hub. Why? Because where most of the Fortune 100 companies are basing themselves. And why is that? It's because most of them are senior and most of them have family and kids. And quite frankly, Singapore is the most family-friendly place in the world. The downside, it can be seen as being a little bit dull and not as dynamic as some of the other Asian cities. However, if you don't have kids and you have a bit more flexibility and you want to do a bit more liver damage, then Hong Kong is the place. It's a lot more fun. Last but not least, there's Sydney in Australia. Now, as much as I love Sydney, it's beautiful and it's a fantastic place to hang out, it's very impractical for a regional role. Unless your business is really based in Australia, then you probably don't have a regional role anyway. It's great for the suntan, great for the surfing lessons, but being 10 hours away from Singapore and over 14 hours away from China is just not practical. To try and summarize, firstly, there's no such thing as one Asia. Second, understand where your business opportunities are and the locations in the regions that you need to maximize those efforts. And finally, put your talent in the places and the cities that will deliver the biggest return. In the second episode, we're going to dive deeper into this region and look more at the opportunities and challenges you may face.